The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay, so welcome everybody to this session, Public Shared Paths. And as you can see on the title, it's a customer showcase. So my name is Sean Toomey. I'm a senior solutions consultant at BricsCAD. I'll be presenting the main kind of structure, and Bruce from Preston Design will be showing all the technical details of how the project was done. Just a quick reminder, we will leave time at the end for questions. So as you think of questions, please type them in. We'll leave some time to go through those. The session is being recorded as well. So if you need to access the recording for whatever reason, if your web connections tend to get a bit unstuck, that'll be available as well. Since we're all working from home at the moment, there's a bit of background noise happening. So I'll mute myself while I'm not talking, but apologies in advance if there's a little bit of distraction on that. So let's get the structure worked out here. So we'll start off, we'll give a little bit of the project background. So Bruce will be able to explain all that. And as we go through this, we'll divide it roughly into 5 points. Working backwards from those, the last point in the visualization, that's where we'll show Twinmotion, which is probably the most practical and engaging part visually. To get there, we will start off with the background. We will then go through the data set and the various challenges. Then there's 2 parts to the design process. There's the general design of the overall path. And this project, as you have seen on the graphics of the invitation, it's got a very interesting bridge as well. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So as I mentioned, my name is Sean Toomey. I've got over 25 years experience in the world of CAD, BIM, GIS, etc. Prior to that, I worked in civil engineering, mainly on bridges and roads, but also some tunnels and hydraulics. I've been with BricsCAD for just over 6 months. On my title is Senior Solutions Consultant, and because I come from the world of infrastructure and roads, I focus mainly on that market. So I'll ask Bruce just to give a quick intro of yourself, mate.
Hi, yeah, I'm Bruce Preston. I'm based in Whangarei, New Zealand. I have many years' experience working as a civil designer drafter. Have also carried out some structural drafting, site supervision, and administration duties. I've worked for local authorities, engineering consultants, port company, and more recently for myself, self-employed. I've used BricsCAD civil site design combination since 2015. Prior to that, I used a lot of the Autodesk products. I chose BricsCAD because of its stability, support, speed, and cost effectiveness. Okay, we can go next.
I've muted myself, sorry, mate. So you mentioned that this project was in conjunction with the MBIE, is that right?
Yes, that's right. It's like I say, I'm based in Whangarei. So the work was done for the Whangarei District Council, funded by the Whangarei District Council, as well as the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment, a government department.
Great. And we're very grateful to Whangarei Council for allowing us to showcase the data, because it's always great to have real current information available. So yeah, it'd be good to get a bit of a background here, Bruce.
Yeah, so what you're seeing there is the route of the shared path, which goes from the city centre on the left all the way up to a suburb called Carmo. On the right-hand side, at Carmo, there's a shopping centre. Is the main path all up, including side paths, is approximately 8,700 metres long. We have 8 schools along the route. There's the sports facilities, shopping centres, a civic centre, just kind of at the centre of left-hand side of the picture there, and also runs alongside residential areas. So the main aim or reason for the initiative was to provide an effective, safe and effective route for students and workers to get to their destinations, to provide a place where you can look after your health, physically and mentally. There's also the reduction of traffic congestion and traffic emissions. As I said before, I think the project's been funded by local and central government. It's been a 5-stage project. At this stage, we've completed stage 4. Stage 5 is still to be done. So we've spent $14 million to date, roundabout, and got another $6 million to be spent on the final stage.
Oh, excellent. It's good seeing the overall scope, and so we've got those blue circles too to represent the 8 schools that are allowing people to go probably both directions, both to and from. And I think everywhere at the moment with the recent pandemic and everything else is embracing the whole exercise and cycling and walking shared path business. So I think it's a very, very current kind of a project and a scope in general. So what we have here is the data set and the challenges. So if you could just give us a brief overview of those, and we'd be keen to hear about the challenges in particular here, Bruce.
As I mentioned, the main path is, including side paths, is about 8,700 meters long. The actual main path is more like 7,000 meters long. We've got 25,000 square meters of concrete, 6,200 meters of fencing, 3,000 meters of stormwater pipe. The path widths have are varied, but they're generally either 4 meters or 3.5 meters wide. For a good part of the first 4 stages of the project, the path has followed the railway corridor, the existing railway corridor, which has a legal width of about 30 meters. So we've used about 6 meter width to place our shared path in. To carry out the design, there's various sources of data. All the aerial photography has been sourced from a company called Coordinates. There's LiDAR data that has been sourced from the Northern Regional Council, property data from Coordinates, surveyed topographical data from various surveyors, and the designs had to, of course, make allowance for all the existing services that are found along the route. Yeah, so another thing to talk about is this path's been well received. I think one of the main things people like is a lot of the landscaping treatments that have been done. They've really kind of enhanced the the experience of using the path. We've got 900 meters of retaining wall, from 1 to 4 meters high, 240 light poles, cabling service ducts. We've purchased various properties just to link into adjacent residential areas, and also just to provide a way out of the path area in an emergency. There's been a number of puffin crossings across kind of arterial roads. As we cross these roads, we're also in the vicinity of the railway line, so that makes for quite a complex site with quite a bit going on. In addition to these, there's just 13 pedestrian rail level crossings, one pedestrian railway underpass, and a repurposed rail bridge about 50 meters long. So yeah, in carrying out this work, we of course have to take note of community concerns and try and, where we can, make allowance for those in our design. So some examples of those are like visually impaired people, privacy issues for properties bordering the shared path, where we can, we try and use existing trees to kind of enhance the experience. Sometimes that isn't possible. Yeah.
Very good.
Next slide, please, Sean.
Yeah, it was very interesting to hear about the complexities on the rail crossings, because we often don't realise just how much is involved with those, because there's obviously Kiwi rail standards as well as safety standards and everything else. So that's great.
Yeah.
This slide is probably one of the most visually interesting ones. What I might do here quickly is just show people the BricsCAD file. So Bruce has been kind enough to share this file with me, which is the model bridge. So the image you see on the right is a photo of the bridge in its current state, and we'll ask Bruce to explain why that is at the moment. But what I find amazing is you can see clearly how well modeled it is to be a direct replica of what's currently there. And if I switch this to a perspective view, where I got all the layers turned on, you can see that the entire bridge has been effectively virtually reassembled. And if I go and turn on my decking, sorry, the decking that Bruce has designed to be more appropriate, and you can see that the entire thing has been put together in a virtual format. So as soon as we saw this, we were really, really fascinated and interested. What's even more interesting really is hearing the backstory of where this has come from. So yeah, Bruce, if you could give us a little bit of an insight into this.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's originally was installed, constructed in 1903 in the central North Island of New Zealand, just north of a town by the name of Tamaranui. It was removed, decommissioned in 2015. The reason for removing it was the structural concerns due to the age and the wide loads of the trains these days apparently was starting to knock the side of the bridge. So that's why it's been decommissioned. So the idea is to transport it from the middle of the North Island up to a contractor here in Whangarei, who will reassemble it and fabricate the new deck. Then it will be shifted to site in large pieces and reassembled there.
Oh, very interesting. The part that makes this really interesting from a SOPR point of view as well is to know that the visualization is also being used to convince everybody that they should take this approach, because it wasn't. Am I right, Bruce, in saying that it wasn't the original plan, that it was identified by you and your colleagues and then proposed as a solution?
Yeah, my colleague has been doing a bit of work with the railways, and his contact there kind of knew what Steve was doing as far as shared path up here in Whangarei was concerned, and he kind of mentioned this disused bridge. So yeah, Steve hopped in the car and had a look, and yeah, thought that.
Yeah, and I think
he was very keen on the idea of using that here.
Yeah, the general initiative to reuse the old resources of rail is an interesting one. There's lots of different types of cycle paths and walking paths being put together all over the world. So this is an extra level of charm and interest on it, I think. And I think what we would, I mean, for us, we could quite happily do a full webinar on this bridge alone, because there's so much that's happened with it, and the fact that the assembly drawings were generated from the model as well. So effectively, the model was used to get the logistics together, and then the frame process of how it's going to be reassembled was derived from that. It's a very impressive achievement.
Yeah, how I worked was the structural engineer from New Zealand Rail provided me with sketch drawings, and from that I modelled that and produced what you see in front of you.
Yep. And
going through that process kind of highlighted or helped understand how it needs to go together. Kind of highlighted some problems with what he was suggesting.
Perfect. But the whole purpose of doing things digitally is exactly for that, to highlight those issues. And what's impressive here is that you got to use the solid modeling side of BricsCAD for this as well. So it's a perfect example of how you could just go and pick up the tool set and use a bunch of very intuitive functions to get one of these things done. So that's the bridge design, which is something that we'd love to come back and do more on in the future. In terms of the general design of the overall shared walking cycling path, again, this is an area we could do several hours on. There's so much to it, but we've asked Bruce just to give us a few of the main overview areas before we show some of the files.
So yeah, general principles that we tried to stick to was keeping the grade of the path between 3 and 8%, well, 3 and 5% actually, which for a good part of the track has been easy to achieve, because as you can see that in the drawing on the top right hand side, a lot of the time we're following existing rail track, so the grade there generally is about 2%. So yeah, the 3 to 5% grade has kind of easily been achieved. The last stage, stage 5, is a bit different, and so we're needing to get up to kind of 8% grades. With this project, of course, there's pre and post construction safety audits, to ensure that the path is safe and fit for purpose. We also try and, as best we can, provide a design that isn't conducive for carrying out crime. So that's what the TED thing is all about. Just got to, as best we can, make sure that there's passive surveillance of the track all the way along, and places where we can't do that, CCTV monitoring is installed. This project involved New Zealand Rail a lot because we're using their land, and they're, as you can imagine, and as they should be, a very safety conscious organisation. So there's been lots of toing and froing with them, just making sure that they're happy with what we're creating. So through the project, design phase of the project, there's been lots of collaboration with other specialist designers. So our role has been to come up with basic design and shape of the project, and then we provide base plans of the design so that other work can be done. Examples of that are, say, lighting design, landscape design, signal design for road crossings, level crossings. Another thing to mention is that the stage 5 actually goes through an old coal mining area. So there's some fairly complex ground conditions there that our design needs to allow for. The bridge itself is quite close to an old mine shaft, which is shown on the drawing on the bottom right hand side. So yeah, there may be there's an ongoing investigation of the ground conditions there, so there may need to be a little bit of adjustment of the bridge location there.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Of these, I was really interested in the crime prevention through engineering design. It's a very very sensible and practical thing to think of, and I think when we get to the visualization area next, that will even add more kind of context to that.
Yeah.
Before we jump to the next slide, let me just quickly show the design file. Now, we won't really have time in today's session to get into the civil site design side. We could happily do several sessions on it. I've just taken an orbited view here to show it. So you can see using the quad these days, we can quickly turn on and off triangles as we need. If we were to go and look at the design, you could bring up the vertical grading and see exactly how it's been put together. We'll happily come back to that at some stage. In terms of this being majorly focused on visualization, one thing I want to emphasize is that as well as doing all the engineering works, and I should probably show some of the outputs as well here. So we've got a sheet set manager set up, which has got all these detailed documents coming in, which show all the construction protocols, etc. What we also would do here is use the model viewer side. So for those of you who use civil design, model viewer is something that you should definitely take advantage of, because what it does ultimately is create most of the visualization for you. So it goes so far as to segregate the triangles and apply materials, which can then be exported back into a drawing file or various type of other files. So in this case, this is the triangulation, and you can see that the batters have got a material applied. And we're going to apply new materials inside in Twinmotion, but it's quite easy to change material. What normally takes time is identifying which triangles get one material. So the fact that all that is done for you by default means you are most of the way there for doing a full visualization. So again, this isn't intended to be a kind of a 101 how-to session. It's more of an overview of the project. What we will do in a little while is show some of how we built the Twinmotion side. But the point here is just to say that it is a real civil site design job, and the main thing to emphasize is that the triangulation that we will use came directly from the model, more or less done on the fly while the design was happening. So that leads on to the whole visualization process, and this area is particularly interesting as well because you mentioned, Bruce, that there was quite a lot of public consultation.
Yeah, part of the what we need to do is we need to go out and talk to the public and just communicate to them what we're proposing. So in the past, we've set up public meetings for stakeholders to come and have a look. We've used schools, their facilities, and spent kind of an hour or two just being there and talking to people, showing them visualizations on the computer and model viewer. And the intention is to use Twinmotion in the future as well, just to that further enhancement. Yeah, and it's also visualization's a handy tool just to communicate to contractors what they're going to be building. Just, I think, fully understand issues. So, yep.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. And the reason we've put this little blue arrow on the PowerPoint here is just to kind of discuss the fact that when you see a visualization, normally you think, okay, that's great. If there was enough money in the project, I would go and do that. But if it's a small project, there isn't time or resources for it. The whole point is that once the triangulation is done, a package like Twinmotion can very quickly take that and make it extremely presentable. So rather than discuss it, let me just bring up Twinmotion here and show you how it was done. So this is more or less the import from civil site design. You can see here, so if you haven't seen Twinmotion before, we've got a series of tabs on the bottom. The first one is import, and when you click on the import button, you browse to a file, and when you click on the file, you've got different options. I tend to use collapse by material. It just means that for the bridge, for example, all the materials that are the same texture will get treated as one object, kind of like a block in BricsCAD. Sometimes you have to watch out for the units conversion. We seem to have a slight issue with centimeters and meters, so sometimes you've got to scale it by parameter, but you can also scale it afterwards if you happen to have missed that. So once you've done those, the geometry comes into the software. And there's only a few things you need to know to get started here. So one is on the right-hand side, you've got the scene viewer. And this is effectively like a layers panel in BricsCAD. So every item that has been imported comes in here. It's good practice, as always, to rename these sensibly. So you can right-click, you can make containers, which are like little folder structures. So under the, say, path elements, you can see if I turn these off, I can then just turn on, say, the verge by itself or whatever I want. So it's just basic controls that we tend to use in our general CAD systems. What also happens is, let's say you've zoomed away off. Actually, before I do that, you can move at different speeds in the software. So at the moment, as I roll the middle mouse button, you can see it's moving very, very slowly. That's because I've pressed number 1 for walking mode. If I press 2, it goes a bit faster. If I press 3, a bit faster again, and then 4 is super fast. So if you're way out here, 4 is brilliant. Press number 4, do a few rolls of the mouse button, and you're in. What happens sometimes is you forget to undo that, or forget to press a different number, and you accidentally spin off the screen. Find your geometry. So for those, what you can do is select the item, on the scene viewer. So I select bridge frame, right click, and zoom to selection. Very, very simple thing. But once you're aware of it, it will save you a bit of hassle down the track. So that is the scene viewer. I'll leave that open because I'm sure at some stage I'll zoom off the screen by accident. The other thing to mention is on the left-hand side, you have your library panel. So in here, you have the main thing we'll use here are materials and characters for people. We also have vehicles and bicycles and everything else, and we'll use vegetation of it as well. So to get started, let's go and apply some materials. So once again, I've just done exactly what I said I shouldn't do. I've forgotten to press number 2 to move at a slower speed. So let me just zoom in here. Now you can see the material I've picked for the embankment here. You can see how it repeats itself. So there's nothing wrong with it, but it's just not what we'd like it to be. So you click on the materials panel here, you go to ground, you select nature, and in here you got a whole bunch of grass types and different types of stone. So we would click on, say, grassy ground. And once that's put in, you can go and change the scale of it first of all. What you can also do to prevent it from looking like it's been repeated is go select more and increase the grunge factor. You can see it applies some inconsistencies as a kind of a shading. And what that does is it lets you subconsciously identify that it's not a series of repeating blocks or repeating images. It's more like a kind of an overall texture. What you can also do is change the luminosity to whatever you want. Now, once you've done this for these materials, you should be aware that you can also do it for the materials which come across from CSD. So you can click on this magnifying glass as a material picker. When you select that, it brings up the properties for that material. So you can then go and exact same process, go and increase the grunge factor and bring down the luminosity or whatever you need, and just work through it in those steps. Adjusting these materials is a very, very intuitive process. And what I mean about the triangles being done in civil site design is that literally all you have to do is grab the material and drag it over the item, and it will change everything there for you. So if I change this to some version of grass, I tend to usually want these to be a little bit darker. And again, I usually push the grunge up quite a bit as well, just so I don't want it to look too obviously done by computer. So you can see how you would work through those, and you will easily explore this materials library. And you will also notice that as well as the ground versions that we've used here, there's a whole bunch of building materials and stones and a whole bunch of others. But in the interest of time, let's just leave materials alone for a little while. We'll come back and do some more in a second. And let's look at trees. So when you go to vegetation and click on trees, there's a whole bunch of existing tree types here. So if I grab one of these and just place a few randomly here, first thing you'll notice is that it randomizes them. So they're not all the same size or orientation. They're all randomized that way. Also, when I hover the mouse over the tree, you can see that it's got a bunch of different sizes. It has a sapling and on the left, a very, very mature version. So if you select one of these trees, you can look at it and see you got the age tab here on the left. If I make it a sapling, it's not just scaling the item, it's actually applying a different version of it as it reaches different ages. So you can show a very, very realistic scenario. When you zoom in detail, the leaves will actually move with the breeze, and you can configure how much of breeze there actually is. So with little or no effort, you're suddenly getting a very, very engaging looking presentation. One point to mention here, which let me just very quickly show it. If you have trees that have fruit on them, so let's go for a sweet cherry tree here. So I've just typed in cherry on my search option here. I put one of these in. You will see that it actually shows the fruit here. If I go select this and pick a view here so you can see the bridge and the trees. When I go into my settings tab and click on, say, let's go weather first of all. I can first of all have all the trees grow by a certain amount. So if I want to show how visibility will change over time, that's available. What I can also do is change the season. So when I get to different seasons, the fruit disappears, the leaves change color, and they start falling off. If you go for winter, it's a bit extreme, but you can easily change those. You can also, if you want to, change the weather. And what's interesting here is you can actually see you have the reflection of the bridge in this pool. So having just imported this, and I'm going through it quite slowly here, you're achieving something here which not that long ago would have taken you weeks to get done. So this is why we like Twinmotion so much. It's taking all the geometry from BricsCAD and civil site design and really bringing it out and making it very, very engaging. So that's how the trees would work. If you wanted to populate a larger area with multiple trees, you could do them like I've done here, one by one, or you can go and select this concept called Vegetation Paint. And on Vegetation Paint, what you do is you drag a few different tree types into your palette. So I'm just going to pick them completely at random here. If you were being more serious about this, you would select these quite carefully. Once you've done these, you click on a brush size. So I've clicked on let's make this a 5 meter diameter brush. And for each of the trees, you select a density. So you work out how many you want to do. You can change it afterwards, so it's not a fait accompli. I'm hovering the mouse here over the paint button. So as I paint in here, it just populates these trees for me. So if I zoom out a little bit, you can very quickly run around and place these everywhere. And you can see, first of all, after I've done this, I can change my density. I can put more in. I've also placed a tree on top of the road. So what I can do is, as well as painting, I've got an eraser button, so I can remove that. So you can quickly place the items you want and then refine it afterwards, which makes it a very, very interactive process. Now, in our case, in my case here, the trees are just for context in the background. I'm not really doing this from the landscaping side. It's just to give a little bit of perspective. What you can also do, so let's just do two things. Let's first of all put some people in, then we put some more realistic looking grass on both of these materials. So to apply people, you just go back out to the top of your library and you select characters. And under characters, you've got a bunch of different options here, all of which are very, very self-explanatory. So if you click on opposed human, first of all, which is the most simple version, it will give you a bunch of options for different people. When you select them, you can grab that person and rotate them and move them around as necessary. And they are static. They're just literally to show a little bit of perspective context for whatever reason you want. You can make it way more interactive by clicking on animated humans. So you pick one of these and pick the person you want. And when you select the person, after you click them, you can see you got different poses here. So they're currently idle. You can change that to speaking, and it will just do a small animation of that person talking and doing gestures. If you go back to idle, within each mode, you got multiple animations. So if I change it from idle to say phoning, the person is now having a conversation, or you can, I think the second one, they're talking on speaker and strolling up and down the path. So that's a perfect way to very quickly add a whole bunch of dynamic interaction to your presentation. So we've gone from a BricsCAD file with contours to a full solid version here that's got literally people moving around it. You could add multiple individuals yourself, or you can click on groups. So under characters, next to animated, you got groups here. On the groups, these are very, very self-explanatory. You got everything from children playing games to people queuing for buses to construction workers. I'll just click on these two. So you got two characters here having a conversation. You place them wherever you want. And you'll notice that if I was to add more, they're all randomized. It's in different groups of people for each version of it. And when you select them here, you could pick the individuals and change that person's cloth, for example. So change the color of their outfit. So that gives a very impressive kind of an example of how you show people interacting with this. And it's obviously a government project that's done for the public. So showing how they work with the surroundings is a really key part of it. Because we've got a limited time here, I will just leave that at this point and go back to putting in some realistic graphs. So I'll do this in two ways. I'll first of all add some rough patches of grass to my batter area here. So let me explain it first of all. On vegetation, I've got, as well as trees, I've got a bunch of other options, one of which is grasses and flowers. So you've got lawns and everything else here. You also have different versions of long grass and dry wild grass, etc. So I'll just click on, say, long grass. And what I could do here is manually scatter a few of these around the place, which looks reasonable enough, but it takes a lot of clicking to get it all done. So what we'll do is the same process as before. We click on Vegetation Paint. This time, instead of trees, we click on grasses, click on long grass here, and on the brush, we make the diameter, say, 1 meter. And for this, the density, we can change it afterwards. We make it around 20%. What we can now do is paint this on here. Now, I think I may have gone too dense, which is no problem. I can change it after. So I can always just select one of these grass objects. And you can see it here. It's called Painted Vegetation on our scene browser, and just change the density here. What you can also do is, if you think, hang on, I missed these areas just next to where the guys are standing. When you've selected it, you can click on the brush icon again, and it will apply the same settings to new areas. And I'll deliberately go over the edge a little bit. So go back to your eraser brush and remove those. So very, very interactive and quick to get these things done. What you'll notice then is that once you've done that, it just gives more shadows and more views onto the item you're working on. Now we'll do the same thing on this strip of grass here. But in this case, we want to have 100% density, and we want to respect the boundaries more carefully. So what we'll do is we select this verge, which shows on the scene browser, the verge object. I can right click that and select isolate. And once my isolate button has been selected, I can go and select Vegetation Paint again, and I'll go back to grasses, and I click on the first one, lawn 01. So my diameter of 1 is good. What I will do is change my density to 100%. You can make it a bit less if you want to, but let's leave that 100. And now what I do is just basically draw over this. And I could do a bigger brush and go over the entire whole lot of it. Now, when I turn everything back on, so I'll right click on verge again and turn off the isolation, what you see now is that these grasses have come in. So it isn't just a set of triangles with a texture. It's now an object that, as we move the sun around, so if I go to my location settings here, and if I change my time of day, you will see how the sun interacts with these objects and creates different shadows. So we're now looking at a very, very presentable depiction of what we're doing here. So this is literally just opening up the file and just running through some of the features in a very, very simplistic way to get us started. The last thing we'll do, which is possibly the most important one, is we'll add some moving cyclists along the path, because it's a shared path for pedestrians and cyclists. So let me just put the sun back up here, and let's zoom out a little bit here. On the final version, which we can show a video of in a while, we've put the cyclists going along most of the path. For a quick version here, what we'll just do is run them across the bridge. So if I click on this option again, and instead of going Vegetation Paint, this time I click on Path. And on Path, you can see you've got characters, vehicles, and bicycles. So obviously characters will move people, vehicles move cars, and bicycle will do bicycles for us. So when you select it, you've got a pen option here where you draw the path. And all you got to do is, if your topography is changing slope quite a bit, you would just make sure that you've got enough points to take that in. I'll just draw it as far as here, right click to finish, and what you'll see straight away are people cycling along that path. And as with everything else, once you've set it up, you can take these grips and move it around to fix any blemishes you might have made. On the bottom here, you can make a whole bunch of changes. So if I change that to 2 lanes, you've got people going each side of it. Depending on which side of the road you drive or cycle on, you can reverse that. The density and the offsets do exactly what you'd expect. I'll increase the density probably a bit too much here just to give us more to look at. You can see how So in my case, because I've stopped here, the cyclists all disappear just after the bridge. So if all I was doing was showing a view from here, that'd be fine. Perfectly good for what we need. And it's so dynamic that after you've done this, you can come back in here, go to your location, and change your shadows to suit what you need to show. So again, just by starting off and being a little bit diligent, you can very, very quickly give a full view of the overall system. The last point to mention very quickly, because I want to leave 15 or 10 minutes for questions at the end of the session. If you go to the media tab down here, you can see you can create images, videos, and everything else. So in terms of sharing this, you can publish it to a website and allow people to interact. People often still want photos and images. So for the invitation for today's webinar, we clicked the view very close to here. Actually, I might have saved it still. So I think it was this view here. We had different characters moving around it. But you click, this is one of the other ones that we used. If you play with the settings, you can do things like, in this case, I've got the fence out of focus and the people in focus. You can do the opposite, where you can show the fence in focus and the people out of focus. And if you want to get very creative, you can have the camera change focus during the animations. So if you go to one of these views, and if you pick a particular view that shows exactly what you need to illustrate, all you got to do is click on Create Image and saves that here for you. What you can do is apply individual lighting to that image. So let's just go and put this one, let's exaggerate and make it very, very early in the morning, so it's still sun coming up. What you'll find now is that as I switch between these different images, the individual settings are saved for each one. So it's not just a camera view, it's also all of the surrounding settings, including which objects are visible on the scene graph. And last point, very quickly, is that as well as doing images, you can do videos. And just to show how easy videos are, I'll just quickly do one here. So let's start here. Click on Create Video. So all you have to do is position your first camera angle and then move to the next camera angle and click on this plus icon. And when you press play, it will animate between those. Now the web connection here might not be fast enough to show you this, but it moves perfectly smooth on my computer. So if you wanted to as well, you could go and press the More button, and you could have different times of the day for the start and the end. If you want the sun to move across, or some people who like to show trees growing to represent those. So I'll just lastly show you one or two finished versions, because the last thing you would do here is click on Export, and you would export these images out. The software is quite clever in terms that it won't display all these pieces of grass when I'm way zoomed out here. You can see how they've been removed. For the purposes of exporting, you can turn everything on. It will take a lot longer to do, but once you've done that, then it will show in a lot more detail. So this is a version here, which is exactly what we've shown previously. We've got some grass on the texture here, got some cyclists moving down, and a character on the phone on the side. This is a slight variation on it. In this case, we've put some titles on the various areas if you want to show how those work. That's a slight variation on the one we had previously. I'll just pause these briefly so you can make sure that the screens can keep up, because sometimes videos struggle over GoToWebinar sessions. So again, I'll just pause that one again. And the last one I'll show is, this is the fence view we mentioned earlier. So we're starting on the bottom, and all we did was take a view on the bottom and move the camera up, press animate. And if this can stream fast enough, it just shows the camera moving past the fence and a view of two people by the side having a chat conversation, and a bunch of cyclists using that rail bridge that Bruce and his colleagues were able to resurrect from the previously decommissioned area. So you can see that it is super interactive. We're very big fans of it, and we are keen to do more and more with it as well. So we can do more detailed sessions very, very happily on this. I want just today to really show some of the details of how we're going to do more with it on this project. So with that, we are just on time. We've left 10 minutes or so for some questions at the end. So let me make sure that everyone is, yeah, Bruce isn't muted. Okay, so if anyone's got some questions, please type them in, or by all means, send these questions during the week. We'll be happy to get back to you, either by email or via separate sessions for those. And before I forget it too, I want to once again thank Bruce and Jas Civil and Whangarei Council and MBIE for allowing us to show all this. It's great to get the opportunity to show real current designs being used for real current scenarios. So let me, if we've got a bunch of people still here, so let me just quickly do one poll if I can. I'm quite keen to know if people currently use Twinmotion with BricsCAD. Okay, so we got more people than I expected who do use it. We got a bunch of people who didn't know it was available. Okay, that's good for us to know, because I'm going to be talking more with the Twinmotion guys about what we can do in terms of different types of promotions and interactions with this. So we had a promotion running until it was June this year, where you could get it for free with any license of BricsCAD. That promotion is finished, but I want to talk to the guys about different things we can do in the future. So it's good for us to get feedback on this. And as you think of more questions or different areas, please leave us know. So with that, I'll just stop the recording at this stage. We'll stay online for another 4 or 5 minutes. If anyone's got any questions, please type them in. We can speak the answer, or we can type it in. Sorry, we've got a question coming in here. Let me just open my questions panel out. Okay, so we've got a bunch of people who've got who want to know more about the design process, the civil site design side process. So we'll do a separate session on that. If anyone needs anything specific, we're happy to direct you to the online resources or put you in touch with those guys. There's a few of them on this call actually. Yeah, and we will also do a more detailed version of the Twinmotion side as well. So many of the things we've touched on in today's session, we could do a full few hours on quite happily. Okay, so with that, once again, Bruce, thank you very much for your time, and thank you for sharing all this. And it's been a huge education for me to learn it all. And we look forward to doing more with you in the future, mate.
Right. Yeah.
Good stuff. Cheers, guys, and we'll see you on the next session.
Thank you. Bye.